Towson getting ready to rock my red with the Capitals as they drop the puck. We obviously have the Terps out at the Horseshoe this weekend in Columbus, and the Ravens are making their way for another lengthy flight across the United States of America into Oakland, California. They'll take on the Raiders and backup quarterback E.J. Manuel this week. This guy here knows what it's like to be without an NFL team. He is in St. Louis. He's one of my blood brothers in the business, Low, these many years, now working for SiriusXM as well for Draft Scout. Used to cover the Rams as well as the NFL out in St. Louis, now covering the remainder of the league. We welcome Howard Balzer back on. He is H. Balzer 721. I am eternally grateful for the tip for the best frozen custard in all the land out there in St. Louis at Ted Drew's. Howard, what's going on, man? Another year without Rams football in St. Louis, and this version of the Rams in L.A. Apparently even has people in L.A. interested, huh?
Well, I mean, they've generated interest in a lot of places because they're playing pretty good football. We'll see if the interest picks up in Los Angeles, because so far it hasn't. It was interesting that the Rams announced before the season that they were cutting off ticket sales at 70,000, ostensibly because the lines were long at the concession stands and the restrooms and things like that. So they wanted to improve the fan experience. When anybody really knows, they cut it off at 70,000 because they knew they weren't going to sell more than that. And in fact, for the first couple home games, one of them they sold around 56,000. And the other one, the opener, was about 60. And, of course, no one, Nestor, seems to have issues with Southern Cal playing in the Coliseum when they routinely get between 80 and 90,000 in there. No one seems to have a problem with the concession stands or the restrooms. But now that they're playing pretty good football, and at least from the standpoint of fun-to-watch football with the offense, scoring points and moving the ball and all that, then this is a much more interesting team to watch right now. So it'll be curious to see if the ticket sales improve over the rest of the season. And what I find interesting is that while the Chargers are just being blasted, it seems everywhere for playing in this small stadium and not being able to sell it out, but they're only not selling it out by a couple of thousand seats, but granted it only seats about 27,000. But no one's saying a word, it seems, about the Rams selling a whole lot fewer tickets than they did last year. And again, with selling 70,000, they were 14,000 under tickets sold for the second home game. No one seems to be saying anything about that, but the Chargers now seem to be everybody's dartboard, I guess. But like I said, we'll see if ticket sales pick up as the season moves on, and they start. I think they've got Seattle at home this coming week, and obviously a division rival. The Rams sitting in first place right now, and that's a pretty attractive matchup. So I'll be very curious to see how many more than 56,000 seats they sell for that game.
Well, selling tickets is a problem everywhere, getting people into the seats. I mean, I was in Cincinnati in week 1, and that was before Neilgate began with the president. And, here in Baltimore, I mean, this week, Howard, I had my local bar sponsor cancel my live Raven shows after almost a decade because the people in his bar are antsy about the Ravens, and they are the booers and the anti-take-the-kneers and the anti-prayers and the call for unity and all that stuff. And, I'm out looking for a new place to do a radio show in week 5 of a 2-2 season where we're in uncharted waters around here for the league and ideology and leadership, and we can beat on Goodell about the leadership that has allowed the Chargers to play in an erector set in Carson, California for no one, and the Rams to move, without a real cry there, and to abandon St. Louis, which was trying to build them another palace out there. All the things, Oakland going to the Vegas. We play out in Oakland this week. All the things that's going on with the league, but boy, this this last couple of weeks and the heat on the Kaepernick thing and everything involving black and white, let's get down to it, and right and left, let's get down to it, and right and wrong, let's get down to it, and the flag and muddling where the flag and military and police and service people meet up with free speech and the First Amendment. And then we see the Second Amendment, and then we got guns in Vegas. It's been a wild, wild week, and I don't know when the wheel stops, where does the NFL wind up? Where they were already having problems because of ticket prices, the ease of games at home, the Red Zone channel, 70-inch TVs, beers being $1 and not $12 on the couch. All the things that was going on with the league. This thing here politically over the last 2 weeks, I've never seen anything like it, Howard.
You raise we could have a 2-hour conversation about this and still have a lot more to talk about because you raise obviously a lot of important issues. And it seems there's no question that what has happened in the NFL over the last 2 weeks is a microcosm of what's going on in the country, as you point out. Because let's be real about this. The first few weeks of the season, the first 2 weeks of the season, there were some players kneeling around the league, and it was being talked about, but it wasn't with any great fervor. It wasn't really being discussed any more than it was last year, and in fact, it might be less. And then, you talk about Goodell and leadership. Well, then we had the leader of our country who came out, decided for whatever reason, on a Friday night, to suddenly make this an issue and not to couch it in a leadership way and say, hey, I don't agree with what the players are doing, but maybe we should listen to what they're trying to say, or is there a better way to do it? No, of course, he couched it in his usual way of, calling them names, in a sense cursing them, saying they should be fired, and that up-ramped it. Well,
there was no way that this group of men, you've been following this for 35 years, Howard, there's at no point in the NFL's history where you were going to call out men of color in this league, en masse, in regards of issues of free speech and freedom and expect that there would not be a knee and there wouldn't be a pushback. Trump knew that, but this really at heart is about Trump and the USFL and the NFL and the league not wanting him in the league, but the top of the league fully financially and ethically and spiritually supporting him, from Bob Kraft to Jerry Jones to Dan Snyder to Woody Johnson, who was looking for an emissary ship over in the UK. I mean, these are Trump's buddies who run this league, and I think Trump thought he could just get them in line, and that's just not the way this is going to work. And clearly
right.
Goodell has not had leadership here in regard to leadership for all, right?
Well, and let's look at the buzzwords too, Nestor, because you were totally 100% when people would say this isn't about race, that's being disingenuous. You mentioned right versus left, and that's what this is, because the president of our country right now speaks only, in essence, to his base of supporters, but the buzzwords that come out of it are, who are these ingrates? Who are these guys making millions? As if because you're making a lot of money, that renders you unable or shouldn't be speaking about injustices or whatever it is that you see. And then the cop-out for those supporters, not only the president, but all those who cheer him when he says that, is that this protest was somehow against the national anthem or against the military, which anyone looking at it and listening to what the players say know it has nothing to do with that at all.
Oh, and meanwhile, Kaepernick's still unemployed. Let me finish.
But that base doesn't want to hear about African Americans talking about being oppressed. And I've heard some people say, how are these players think that they are oppressed? They weren't saying they were. They were speaking out about the oppression and what they see as inequality. And that to me is the major issue. And what is really lost in this, Nestor, is this whole thing about the anthem and the military and all that. Again, this was never a protest against because it was done at the national anthem by those who did it, because you get noticed. what do protesters, those wanting to protest something, want to do? They want to be seen and be heard with their protest. Some people say, well, do it at another time. Well, at another time, who's listening? Who's watching? But at the anthem, a lot of people are. So it was done at that moment to be noticed. But again, there are those who don't want to listen, they don't want to hear it, and they won't engage in those conversations because it's uncomfortable. And that is the issue, and that is the issue with where we are in this country with some of the issues. You talked about it. First Amendment, Second Amendment, those have been bastardized over the years where people speak of them and don't even understand what those amendments mean.
Or protect, or who they protect, or how they protect people, including them.
Well, and the Second Amendment is the biggest one because that, we support guns because that's the Second Amendment. Read the second. Those people should read the Second Amendment. They don't even know what it means. It was the right to bear arms at a time when we were declaring our independence from a country. So it was a right to bear arms to defend yourself against revolution. I don't think our founding fathers had it in there. This is to defend yourself. This wasn't the right to bear arms with AK-47. But again, no one wants to have that conversation because of the politics, because of the money, and because of all those things that keep people elected. And that's where our country is, but no one wants to do anything about it. And and the NFL, like I said, has become a microcosm to it. And one last point on all this, because I know you probably didn't want to talk about this.
No, this is fine because this is where we are. We have to talk about it. It's affecting my life now, right? I mean, all of our lives,
right? Before 2009, the players weren't even on the sideline for the national anthem. That wasn't done. In 2009, it was changed to bring the players out. Why? Because the armed forces and the military were paying the NFL in marketing and promotion and giving them money. And so part of it was have the players come out for the national anthem. So then they talk about respecting the flag, and yet we see the flag on advertisement. We see the flag on bikinis. We see the flag, or not the flag, but a picture of it on beer cans. I don't hear anybody saying that that's disrespecting the flag. That to me is disrespecting the flag in a sense a whole lot more for commercial purposes than some players trying to speak out about things they believe in.
We're usually talking X's and O's with Howard Balzer. He is HBalzer721 out on Twitter, as well as at SiriusXM and Draft Scout. We'll get to that in a minute. And certainly onto the football field and, the booing of the prayer of unity, which was, even a further disgrace than cheering the injury of Kyle Bowler a decade ago here. And, we've seen the dark side of the NFL fans all the time. But, for the Ravens, the last 2 weeks after the knee, what comes after that on my Facebook page is these guys are more interested in kneeling than playing football. They clearly got their asses kicked over in London. It was not a good effort against the Steelers. And then you break the X's and O's down and you talk about Marshall Yonda not being there, Brandon Williams not being there, Brent Urban not being there, and who will be the fill-ins. And then you talk about how number 5 is playing right now, which is, by his own admission, not very good. And by any measurement, the Ravens are in a world of hurt here going out to Oakland. Now, they're going to get a backup quarterback this week in E.J. Manuel, but the Ravens season is a little bit tinkering and teetering here at a point where the fan base is up in arms.
Yeah, and I see that. And what's interesting real quick is I always chuckle, and I have my entire career chuckled over the mindset of fandom that would who sees everything within a narrow prism of their team and nothing else happens outside of that. And so that when your team loses, it's because all they're caring about is kneeling. Well, what about the teams that won? They weren't thinking about kneeling, but they won. So how do you reconcile that? Well, fans don't, because they don't see another team. That other team in their mind doesn't exist. But the bottom line, like you said, is that this is a team that has some flaws, obviously. You talked about the players they've lost on the offensive line and the defense just since the season started. Not to mention the players that they lost in the off season on the offensive line. There's a quarterback who, even in the games they won, didn't play that well. I think there was one that he actually played relatively well, but it's a quarterback that had no practice. In Carolina, they're talking about the same thing, the slow start that Cam Newton got off to. And everyone is saying or asking, boy, what's going on with Cam Newton? Why is this the way it is? Well, no one wants to look at it with reality and say, when you spend an off season rehabbing an injury, you are not preparing to play football. You are rehabbing the injury. And when that rehab involves not being able to practice in OTAs and not being able to practice in training camp, and for a quarterback, that means not throwing and not, creating that timing with his teammates, then that is going to have an effect. It's funny to me, Lester, because everyone is all somewhat supposedly excited in Indianapolis. Oh, Andrew Luck is finally going to be able to start throwing the football, as if he's just going to walk out on the field after having not done anything for 8 or 9 months and think he's going to be the Andrew Luck of a couple of years ago. Anyone who thinks that is, I don't know what hallucinogenic substances they're taking.
But by the way, as Coach Billick said this week, there's a reason we practice, right?
Well, exactly. And so, but no one wants to see that. They think somehow that these guys, and this probably goes to all sports to a degree, they think that these guys are machines or robots, and so once the machine is fixed, you just walk out there and everything is the same as it was before.
Like it's like a washing machine.
That's not reality. But then again, as we see with a lot of things, is many people don't deal in reality, and that's one of the problems. So as you point out, they have all these things. They still can't run the ball. They got a young running back, Alex Collins. It maybe looks like he's got something to him, but then he can't hold on to the ball and he fumbles, and so there's not a lot of confidence in him. And so, what do you got? You have a flawed team that the first couple of weeks when they can take the ball away 5 times in each game, they have a chance of winning. And when that doesn't happen, I think they've had one takeaway the last 2 games, and then we see the result of it, and that's where they are. And some will say, "Oh, it's the head coach, it's this." No, it's personnel. Coaching's important. Don't get me wrong, but it's personnel in this league that wins. And right now, the Ravens have a lot of questions with that personnel.
And when you take away a $10 million guard and a $12 million defensive tackle and just pull them out, that's why those guys get paid that money, right? I mean, those guys have to come to post or you can't win.
Right. Exactly right. And I saw a quote. You probably know who it was. I forget who it was. I saw it yesterday from someone on that Ravens defensive line who was basically, has the puppet strings working and mouths what the coaches say. Because what do we hear, Nestor, all the time?
Next man up. Next man up.
Yeah, exactly. Next man up. And the next guy has to do the job. Well, you hope that he does. But there's a reason most of the time that the next man up isn't playing. Because like you said, the guy who is playing is making, especially at that level of $10, $12 million a year, there's a reason that you paid him that money. And they're a whole lot better than that guy who's the next man up. And the player said, he's just got to do what he's supposed to do and do his assignment. Well, yeah, he might know his assignment, and he might be trying to do what he's trying to do, but now the guy he's matched up against is going to beat him most of the time and handle him. And so that's what you have here. You have a sport of matchups, of players against players, and on a lot of players, and a lot of plays, rather, the other guy is just better than your guy. And that's just the reality of it. And so if you have too many of those, you're not going to win. But no one can come out and tell the truth, because then it sounds like you're making excuses. And then the fans come out and the media comes out and says, well, then you shouldn't be making excuses. They leave it up to us in the media to see it and try to explain it and be realistic about it. But even when you do, you get blamed. I got this all the time, Nestor, in St. Louis.
You're an apologist, right? Of course.
Yeah, I'm an apologist. I'm just speaking reality, not an apologist. There was one year the Rams had 13 different offensive line starters in one season. 13 different guys. And let's remember, they started the season with only 8 or 9 offensive linemen on the roster. So they were signing guys or playing guys and starting them who they signed off the street after the season started. And when I would bring that up, I'd get this, well, I know there's injuries, but no. At some points there is no but. But there's my but that's what people will say. Oh, you have to be creative. The offensive coordinator has to be creative. This isn't high school. This is the NFL. I mean, you can be creative all you want, but if you don't have the players that can execute and carry out that creativity, you're done. And the coordinator then will only establish a game plan that gives them some chance, hopefully, of keeping the game close and winning. You get creative, you start throwing down the ball down the field, you can get tons of sacks, interceptions, and then you can get blown out. And then everybody's screaming anyway. So that's the reality that some people have to have. But as I've seen and I know and I've talked about, most observers of sports in general, not just the NFL, don't have a sense of reality about things.
He is Howard Balzer. He is H. Balzer 721 out at SiriusXM as well as at DraftScout.com as well. Last thing for you, Howard. I mean, if the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket, and perhaps we are, at least the Patriots are going down with everyone else, right? I mean, at least they'll be the first one to go along. Look, that defense is a mess, right? I mean, that's probably the biggest story in the NFL because they were perceived to be so much better than everyone else, and it's pretty clear they're not going to be either. And they're going to scheme it up and draw it up and coach it up, as you've pointed out, but they don't have the front seven they've had before.
They don't, and Hightower, one of their best players on that front seven, has been hurt. Rob Ninkovich retired before camp, and they've had the one thing though is in the secondary they've had a bunch of miscommunications that have led to big plays against them, and has helped turn some close games into losses instead of wins. But I will still always caution about burying the Patriots too early, because this isn't the first time that they've been 2-2 after 4 weeks, and there's been plenty of other times where 2-2 still became 13-3. I remember one year people were burying them when they were 2-2, and they won 10 in a row. And so I'm not predicting they will do that, but all I'm saying is don't be surprised if they do, because they usually get off to slow starts. I saw a stat recently that Bill Belichick in New England in his career in September has had a winning percentage of 65.5. Now, granted, right now it's only 50, and no doubt about it. But, of course, one win from those 4 losses makes it 75 instead of 65.5. But be that as it may, 65.5 in September, 75.9 the rest of the season. So all I'm saying is don't count this team out too quickly. But there's no doubt, like you said, they aren't the same team defensively. Can they get it together? And a lot of times you have new players. You're slotting this guy here, slotting this guy there. What the Patriots ask their guys to do defensively is unique and different. And a lot of times it takes them I think Stephon Gilmore has been affected by that. The guy they paid all that money to, he's come to a new system, a new way doing things, and he has struggled early. It's hard for me to believe that he will continue playing that poorly the rest of the year. And so, again, we'll see how it develops. But like I said, don't count him out.
Any thoughts on the Raiders this week? We're going out there, E.J. Manuel. We thought this would be a tough matchup all the way along, but boy, Jack's got his problems out there, doesn't he?
He really does. And the offensive line hasn't played as well as they thought. The running game has disappeared. Not that it was ever great, but Marshawn Lynch ran for, I believe, it was 76 yards in the first game of the season, and every week it's gone down since then, and precipitously down, like from 76 to 58 to 19, I think, and then this past week he had 12 yards rushing. So they've got to get back to the basics, especially with Manuel at cornerback. Run the football. They can't get the ball to the receivers. Michael Crabtree didn't play last week. He had 1 reception, and Amari Cooper had 1 reception the previous week in the loss to Washington. And then Cooper only had 2 catches for 9 yards in the game this past Sunday. Everyone says, well, Derek Carr got hurt. But he got hurt at the end of the third quarter, and they still only scored 7 points up till then, or 1 touchdown. So I'm not sure what they're going to be able to accomplish. They still got the players to still be pretty good, and maybe they kind of, batten down the hatches, use all the cliches and get themselves together, because now they don't have Derek Carr, and they'll rise up and play a lot better. But like you said, that offense is struggling right now. They have an excellent offensive line, one of the better ones in the league, but they haven't played well either these last 2 weeks. So this one, I'm sure they're looking at it and saying we can get well in this game, and we'll see what they're able to do against the Ravens.
Chiefs and Denver have been better too. Unlike our division right now, where it looks like it's the Steelers and everyone else, that division there is a real catfight. I mean, a lot of these divisions are. I mean, now that the Patriots are back to earth, I mean, the whole South is going to be a mess in the AFC. Eagles on top. I mean, Lions and the Packers don't look like they're going to run away and hide. I mean, there's plenty of drama here at the Quarter Bowl. It's been a very tumultuous, interesting season in a lot of places, I think. And I don't just mean the knee and politics and all the off-the-field stuff we're talking about. The actual football itself, we have no idea who the best teams are outside of Kansas City, right?
No, you're 100% right. And the Chiefs just seem to find ways to win, as they did this past Monday night. And so many things around the league, though, are traced to offense, and offense is struggling. The Ravens aren't the only one that's the case. The Cowboys haven't played as well offensively as they did last year. And to me, most of it, a large majority of it, everyone wants to blame the quarterback, obviously, but a large majority of it traces to offensive lines, where you see all around the league. It's hard to keep lines together for a variety of reasons, whether it's free agency players leave, whether it's injuries, and now you're moving guys around. Young guys aren't trained as well as they were in the past to come into the league. Then you're forced to play young guys, and then you end up having to move them around because teams want these guys that can play guard and play tackle and play all these positions. But what ends up happening is, especially during a game, if you get an injury, some teams only dress 7 offensive linemen in games. And so if all of a sudden a guy goes down in the game, sometimes you don't have the guy on the bench doesn't play the position that the guy went down. And so all of a sudden now you've got to move 2 or sometimes 3 players to different positions that they started the game with, much less if you have to do that during the week with shuffling guys around the line. And there's no unit that is more based on players playing together and chemistry and who's doing what than the offensive line. 5 guys on the same page. And so, again, when you start moving them around and shuffling them, you're going to have offensive issues. And so you have teams like Oakland last week that was 2 for 12 on third down, and that's with a good offensive line. That's where it raises its ugly head. You'll make some good plays here and there, but all on third down or in the red zone is where sometimes it falls apart. And just look around the league, and if you see an offense is struggling, check out the offensive line or check out the running game, which I still believe is very important. And that's where it begins to deteriorate. And I think, Nestor, that's what we've seen in the beginning of this season. Will some of these lines come together? Perhaps, but they need the same guys coming together. It doesn't happen when you're continuing to move players around.
Well, and that has been the story here for the Ravens throughout the preseason, off-season, in-season. He is Howard Balzer, HBalzer721, out on Twitter. Howard, tell everybody about Draft Scout, because I know you want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, it's NFLDraftScout.com. It's powered by the Sports Exchange, which I've been involved in for over 2 decades. And it's just a phenomenal website, but it's not just about the draft. You can also go on there and get a lot of information about, we have reports on every team in the NFL, the database in there with updating it with what goes on during the college season. We have 1,000 players rated already for the 2018 NFL Draft. And those ratings change, they get updated. But the website is unbelievable. We started a collaboration with the Pro Football Hall of Fame with NFL Draft Scout. And so I would just encourage people to go there, NFLDraftScout.com, and you'll get lost in it for a long time. There's the history of the draft, things like that, current, like I said, information on the NFL teams, and like I said, just an amazing website for any and all information that anybody could want.
I'm on it right now, NFLDraftScout.com. He is Howard Balzer, HBalzer721, out on Twitter. Howard, always a pleasure to check in with you out in St. Louis. We'll be following along. We'll stay in touch, man.
Take care, man. Always enjoy talking with you.
I love having you on. Howard Balzer, a voter for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame presents that NFLDraftScout.com. Go check it out. Pretty cool site. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.